Hello and welcome to this exploring session looking at some more Lord Mayor's shows from 1633 and 1634. We are rapidly running out of the 1630s, but we still have a long way to go in terms of the material that we're looking at. Lord Mayor's shows, almost always performed on the 29th of October, commissioned especially for the incoming Lord Mayor as part of the celebration as he goes in to be sworn in. I'll be throwing a map up on my screen every so often to give you an idea of the procession route, but broadly speaking everyone starts at the Guildhall, saunter down to the river, get on boats, go to Westminster to get sworn in, and then return and alight a little south of St Paul's, saunter up to St Paul's, and then wander along Cheapside where the primary pageants are performed, but there's an awful lot going on all along the route, which may or may not be detailed in this session. We've done a couple of Thomas Heywood texts, and he does not tell you things that you might already know if you had been there. He quite pointedly made that point last time. So we may get more or less detail as we go. We shall see. Reading and exploring these texts today will be Greg. Introduce yourself to the room.
Hello, I'm Greg. I just love Lord Mayor shows. I was lucky enough to do some of the editing on these, and you're in for a treat if you haven't been to one before.
Eric, introduce yourself in your I timed that perfectly so that you were taking a sip of water.
Yes, hi, I'm Eric, and I was drinking water. And not vodka, just water. I promise.
Honest. It's gin.
Yes.
It's gin. And Angela, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Angela. I'm in London, but there's no Lord Mayor lurking around here.
Stephen, introduce yourself, please.
I'm Stephen. That's because I've got him.
Of course. Liza, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Liza. I'm an immigrant to this country, but I do know the difference between a mayor and a Lord Mayor. And a cat.
As do your cats.
Yeah, some bells told me I would be Lord Mayor if I turned again.
Yeah, those lying bells. Rachael, introduce yourself, please.
Rachael Nicole, actor in New Jersey. Yeah.
And finally, Tracey, introduce yourself and the reason why we're really happy today.
I'm Tracey. I may be here in Bath, rural Bath, but I'm, as always, emotionally and mentally here in the City of London. And we're celebrating today, with or without gin, because Rob and I have just received some grant income to put on some staging of one of the Lord Mayor's shows, hopefully this autumn. So that's quite exciting.
Yes, the nice thing about outdoor events is that horrible diseases do not necessarily interfere with them quite as much as indoor theatre things. So we are hoping that all will go well in our preparations and that we will be able to announce more exciting things as we go. More will be forthcoming. I'm your host, Robert Crighton, and we are going to now dive into two Lord Mayor shows from 1633 is up first. And I'm going to ask Liza if you could read the the title page and the introductory bump from Thomas Heywood, our author for this first text.
Londini Emporia, or London's Mercatura, expressed in sundry triumphs, pageants, and shows at the inauguration of the Right Honourable Ralph Freeman into the mayoralty of the famous and far-renowned city of London. All the charge and expense of the laborious projects both by water and land being the sole undertaking of the Right Worshipful Company of Cloth Workers. Written by Thomas Heywood. Redeunt Spectacula. Printed at London by Nicholas Oakes, 1633. To the Right Honourable... Wait, do you want the epistle too?
Oh yes, continue in the voice of John Heywood, please.
To the Right Honourable Ralph Freeman, Lord Mayor of this renowned metropolis, London. Right Honourable, the triumphs and solemnities of this day are dedicated and devoted to this your happy inauguration, which, as time warranteth, so custom confirmeth, And herein hath this city a priority above any metropolis in Europe. For Rome itself, when the monarchy of the world was under her sole jurisdiction, never received her praetor, consul, or dictator with the like pomp and solemnity. Yet it is derived unto you from antiquity, and I wish it may continue to all posterity. And, sir, for your own part, I am not altogether unacquainted with your modesty, which would willingly have evaded this honourable trouble. But now you find that the condition of honour is such that it enquireth after him who regardeth it not, courteth him that affecteth it not, and followeth him fastest who most flieth it, as knowing that it is not the place which maketh the person, but the person which maketh the place truly honourable. Which now hath invited you to your merit, howsoever against your mind, according to that of the famous historiographer Livy, Decad, Book 4, Gratia et onus opportuniores interdum non cupidientibus sunt. Advising you withal to this your high office and calling to observe the necessary adjuncts thereto belonging, namely, affability with authority, and with your sword and power commiseration and pity. Neither can I wish you a better precedent to imitate than your predecessor, of whom I may say, semper onus nomenque sum laudesque manebunt. Not questioning, but that we may speak the like of yourself, and the two worthy gentlemen the sheriffs, your assistants, when time shall summon you to resign your places to these who shall succeed you. And thus humbly I take my leave of your lordship with this sentence borrowed from Seneca. Bonum est laudari, sed prestantius est esse laudabilem. Your lordship's humbly devoted, Thomas Heywood.
Oh, always good to throw in a bit of Seneca there. As last time, I noted in the margin of my note there, just going, some of this seems awfully familiar. This comparing with Rome. It feels like he's used some of this material before, if not identically, but it's the same sort of general theme. Anyway, this is for the Right Honourable Ralph Freeman, and it's the Right Worshipful Company of the Cloth Workers. Tracey, anything about Ralph and the Cloth Workers?
Yeah, the Cloth Workers were number 12 of 12, which I think Heywood either mentions in this one or the next one for them, which was. And they were not particularly well off, and they hadn't actually had a Lord Mayor since 1606, and that was a plague year. So they've been out of the frame for a very long time, right back to the 1590s. So that there's kind of that's sort of interesting. However, Freeman himself was extremely wealthy. He had been involved with the East India Company for some time, and as Heywood goes on to describe, he was an extremely wealthy merchant. His ships all over the world, all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, he never made it to the end of his term. He only got about halfway through and then died. In March 1634, so he had to be succeeded by somebody midway through, which was a grocer called Thomas Molson. So, but he was quite old. He was in his mid-70s, so yeah.
Well, even so, it'd be nice if he'd finished his term, you know. Okay, let's get into the text. There's going to be some more introductory throat clearing before we actually get to the first show by the water, which we will go through now. I'll ask Angela if you can do the first chunk, Stephen if you can do the list, 8 offices, and Greg if you can do the chunk that follows that concerning this company of cloth workers. We'll pause briefly before we then start diving into some shows.
Mercatura, merchandise, the Greeks call Emporia, and Emporos, a merchant, the Hebrews Mecca. From hence, it seems, the poets called Hermes, the son of Jupiter and Maia, Mercury, making him the god of merchants and merchandise. The mystery whereof hath in the ancient times been held glorious, and the professors thereof illustrious as those by whose adventure and industry unknown countries have been discovered, friendship with foreign princes contracted, barbarous nations to humane gentleness and courtesy reduced, and all such useful commodities in foreign climates abounding, and in their own wanting made conducible and frequent, nay, many of them have not only been the erectors of brave and goodly structures, but the founders of great and famous cities. For so saith Plutarch in Solon, Merchandise itself, according to Aristotle, consisteth of three things: navigation, furneration, and negotiation, all which are commendably approved if considerately and conscionably used.
8 offices of piety are in a merchant required. 1. Rectitudo conscientiae, uprightness of conscience, which is most acceptable to the Creator, and therefore ought to be more prized by the creature than any vainglorious title, as styled by our best theologists, the indulgent mother of all virtues whatsoever. 2. Simulationis and dissimulationis seclusion, a seclusion or separation from all dissembling or equivocation. 3. Frandum debitare, to abandon all fraud or deceit in bargaining, but in all covenants and contracts to observe truth and irreprovable fidelity. 4. Justitiam exercere, to exercise justice, which excludeth the practice of injury, extortion, and oppression. 5. Superbiam deponere, to lay by all pride, for as divine Plato saith, he who knoweth himself best esteemeth of himself the least. We read also in Socrates that pride is a vice, which of young men ought to be carefully avoided, of old men utterly abjured, of all men suspected and feared. 6. Beneficentia uti, out of his abundance to be open-handed unto all, but especially unto the poor and indigent. 7. Avaritiam frenare, to bridle the insatiate desire of getting. For the avaricious man wanteth as well what he hath as what he hath not, who hath great travail in gathering wealth, more danger in keeping it, much law in defending it, most torment in departing from it. 8. Solicitudines resicare, to renounce all care and trouble of mind which may hinder divine contemplation, rather to fix his thoughts upon that heavenly treasure, which the moth corrupteth not, the fire cannot waste, nor the sea rack. All these things desirable being known to be eminent in your lordship, was the main inducement to entitle this present show by this apt denomination, Londini Emporia. Further, of merchants we read Horace thus: Impiga extremis currit Mercator ad indos per mare pauperiam fugiens per saxa per ignis. The merchant to the farthest Indies flies, through seas, rocks, fires, lest want should him surprise.
Concerning this company of cloth workers, none have been more ancient, as claiming their place from the first institution, and though in count the last of 12, yet every way equal with first or any. The reasons are pregnant, and briefly these: the nobility of the land are called pairs, that is, peers, for their parity and equality as having prevalent voices in the high session or court of parliament. The two famous universities are equal sisters. Neither one can claim priority above the other, yet because they cannot be named at once, those of Cambridge say Cambridge and Oxford. Those of Oxford say Oxford and Cambridge, which neither addeth nor detracteth from the other. In all numbers there is a compulsive necessity of order, only for method's sake, not that we can properly say this figure in itself is better than that, being all of them only helpers to make up an account, since that all the Lord Mayors of this honourable city, from which of the 12 companies soever they be elected, bear one sword, receive one power, and retain like authority, there being no difference at all in place, office, or in granting privileges or immunities, etc., 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 etc. I hold them without all equal, without difference. If any shall claim priority or precedence above the rest, let it be conferred upon that which breedeth the best magistrates. And of this company there have been these named, not so the least eminent as Sir William Hart, Lord Mayor, anno 1559, Sir Rowland Heywood, anno 1570, who was twice Lord Mayor at the least, Sir James Howe, anno 1574, Sir Edward Osborne, anno 1583, Thomas Skinner, who died before he was knighted, 1596, Sir John Spencer, anno 1594, Michael Mosley, 1599, Sir John Watt, 1606. And now, this present year, 1633, the Right Honourable Ralph Freeman, neither is it the least honour to this right worshipful fraternity that it pleased Royal King James of sacred memory, besides divers others of the nobility, to enter into the freedom and brotherhood of this company.
Right. Well, on a pragmatic note, not a lot there that is necessarily helpful to our decoding of how these would be staged. But there are some nice points in there. I think that nice point about the cloth workers. We might be the last one in the gang, but we're all equal, really. Honest. Sort of special pleading sort of there. An awful lot of demonstration of his learning going on there, which is what Heywood does. Any brief thoughts on this opening sort of salvo? None of it seems to be directly connecting to what is performed. It may be thematically linked, but it doesn't give us any particular clues as to what would have been eventing on the day yet. Stephen.
I'm wondering about the piety point, 8 offices of piety, which to my sort of ex-Catholic ears sounds very much like this sort of catechism. So I wondered if there were what links there were to sort of an intersection between religious discourses and merchants, or whether it's Heywood kind of making something up for some reason or other.
It's a bit like what we see in some of Middleton's shows. There's a kind of association with sort of particularly Protestant values for a number of these Lord Mayors. And you can kind of tell when the writer is keen on them. He's obviously keen on Freeman in the way he was very keen on William Renton the year before, and not so keen on the guy before that. The ones who kind of thinks he's on the right side of the fence, he's quite enthusiastic about. But yeah, these are kind of secular-ish virtues, I guess.
Okay, Rachel, but then we will move on, as we may get more out of this once we connect it with the actual text of the pageants.
No, I was just gonna ask, more about what the cloth workers did, and then also, I've been here for a couple of these now, and have they had why have they had so few Lord Mayors? Are they the type that tries to avoid it, or have they just not received anybody?
I think they're kind of their masters and other kind of top men are too busy making money to worry about city politics. That's my impression. They do the kind of the more sort of smelly side of the cloth working. Like the mercers are right at the top. They deal with all the fancy fabrics. The cloth workers took over the fullers back in the 16th century, who are basically the people who steep fabric in pea. So yeah, they kind of not really the elite of the city by any means.
Other thoughts? Hold on to for the moment, and we'll pick up those threads as we go. We're going to read the first show by the water and the first show by land. So this is at the beginning of the day. They've sauntered down from the Guildhall, process down, lots of dignitaries, etc., Lord Mayor, and as they get onto barges to travel along the water, there is a show. There will also be lots of cannons and things going off, and then when they return after going to Westminster, they will have their first show on the land when they alight near St Paul's, and so we have 2 shows coming up next. I'll ask Rachel to read the introductory notes on the show by the water. I'll ask Eric to read the speech on the water, and then for the first show by land, Liza, if you can read the introductory material, and Stephen, if you could be a shepherd. And let's see those first 2 shows. Let's find out what they do. Rachel, if you could read the first show by water, please.
I come now to the first show by water, which is a sea chariot beautified and adorned with shellfishes of sundry fashion and splendor. The fabric itself being visible to all needeth not any expression from me. This chariot of no usual form or figure is drawn by 2 griffins, the supporters to the arms of this worshipful company, those which ride upon these commixed birds and beasts bearing staves with pendants falling from their tops, in which are portrayed the arms of the 2 sheriffs now in place. The speaker is Themesis, or the genius of the river Thames, increased to this navigable depth by the meeting of the Tame and Isis, he being seated in the front of the chariot with his water nymphs clad in several colors about him, seemeth asleep, but at the approach of the Lord Mayor's barge, he rouseth himself as being newly wakened from a dream, and speaketh as followeth. The river at this time clinging by sundry water engines.
Can Themesis himself so far forget? But 'tis so long since Tame and Isis met, that 'tis not rare, for we 2 are grown old, and being river is subject to take cold. Forced with extremity of pain to groan, is troubled with the gravel and the stone. Whole shelves are in our reins, but fate so pleased by artists we late have got some ease. Thanks to our patriots. Oh, when I look on you, I must acknowledge to a brook my river had been turned, had not your care been ever studious for our best welfare. My recollection help me. You are he that stains down as far as the lee, are my great lord and chief. First, then, I bow to your inauguration, and now rouse me in my sea chariot, drawn or led by your own griffins, birds who have the head of eagles, lion's body, wings beside, all symbols of that praetor. Who shall guide so great a state? No further, griffins can snatch from the earth the harnessed horse, and man to prey on them at pleasure. These imply that you must always have an eagle's eye to outgaze the sun, and keep that aquiline sight to see what's wrong and to distinguish right. The lion's strength and boldness he must have, with all his pity, for to such as crave or yield unto him, aiming themselves dying, scorning to kill, he will not touch them lying. But such as strive or shall opportune his laws, he rends and tears them with his kingly paws. The wings your griffins bear import what speed should be applied to such as justice need. But why should I, though best of Neptune's sons, whose stream almost by your permission runs, instruct him who can teach? Since the last year till this day, never ran my tides so clear as now they do. Were never so become with barges, ensigns, trumpets, fife, and drum. Methinks you make me young again to view old customs kept, and in them all things new. Though I by name of Themesis are known, my streams are yours. You welcome to your own. Pass and return safe. Thus much on we build. What's on in my waters wanting land shall yield.
And Liza, the first show by land.
Sorry, miles away. The first show by land presenteth itself in St. Paul's churchyard, which is a shepherd grazing his flock upon an hill adorned with several trees, and sundry sorts of flowers. He sitteth upon a dial, to which his sheep-hook is the gnomon, a symbol of his care and vigilancy. Upon the same platform, where his sheep are resting in several postures, appeareth a wolf, ready to seize upon his prey, at whose presence, though his dogs seem terrified, and flies for refuge to his master, yet he stands ready at all hours with a bold spirit and wakeful eye, both for the defence of his charge and offence of the common adversary, the wolf, which reflecteth upon the office of praetor this day inaugurated, wherein is expressed not only the care he ought to have of his flock, but also of the profit which ariseth from the fleece, from which the mystery of the cloth workers deriveth its original. Pastor, or opilio in the Roman tongue, and in ours a shepherd, the Hebrews call rohe, from which some are opinion rex and roy are derived. The Greeks call him poimin, which properly implies ovium pastor, or a feeder of sheep, to which charge none ought to aspire who is not lawfully called, but the shepherd entereth by the door, which is the voice of a free election, and is not that mercenarius pastor, of whom it is thus spoken, he seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth, etc. I shall not need to swell my pages by reciting the sundry profits and emoluments arising from this most necessary mystery, without which no commonweal were able to subsist, nor to reckon up into how many several provinces and countries this commodity of cloth is transported and vended, nor what several sorts of wares by barter and commerce are in exchange of that brought over into our own kingdom. Therefore, to cut off circumstance, I proceed to the shepherd's speech as followeth.
If a true shepherd you desire to see, look this way, for he's emblemed here in me. But you, grave praetor, raised to this high state, he whom as now I only personate, the numerous throng which you this day behold are your own sheep. This city is their fold, and by your great discretion they shall best know where to browse by day, by night to rest. As I, so you must on a dial sit, which hath no gnomon but my staff to it, and such your sword is now, your wakeful eye must still be ope to watch where you can spy the ravenous wolf to press and block the way, lest he on any of your flock should prey. Although my dog fly from him, who hath been rent with his and fears his horrid grin, yet at all hours you see I ready stand, with armed heart, sheep-hook in my hand. So with your sword must you, both with an high undaunted spirit and with a vigilant eye, lest any envious thorn or scratching briar may raise their skins or on their fleeces tire, and that your charge so carefully be borne, they may never but in season shorn. Great reason too you have, for by this trade, of which great freemen you first free were made, the whole land's cloth, no mystery, no art, science, or manufacture that hath part in theory or practice, but must all give due respect to this in general. For since the trade of clothing first begun, both from the scorching of the summer's sun and blustering north winds, rich, poor, young and old hath been defenced. Nor could that fleece of gold Colchis still boast, and the ancient poets read, so useful prove or make so fine a thread, with ours, low prize because not counted rare, no remote climates able to compare. It is that only merchandise which brings all novels wanting here. Even foreign kings have thought themselves rich habited to have worn such cloth as for the commonest we scorn. Oh, bless then our increase, those that have been in the world's remote parts and strange nations seen. For want of cloth, find them go naked there. Yet men, like us, and the same image bear, make much, sir, of your great charge. 'Tis not mine. Ye are the true shepherd. I my place have resigned.
And thus ends that first show by land. And yes, we're at the churchyard at St. Paul's there. Yes, so we've got a couple of things which possibly are recycling elements. We've seen a hill with trees or a tree before. We've had that a few times in Paul's churchyard. I'm wondering if it's just a very appropriate thing for here. I think the last time we had that was 1631, a couple of years ago, and there's elements there that feel very, very familiar. There was a question in the chat for the water show about the river at this time clinging by sundry water engines, and what those water engines might be. I don't know if anyone in the room has any thoughts on that, or any other thoughts about the show on the water, or by the water. It's not the first show on the water, it's by the water. And what precisely...
I think the show by the water, you do get a nice little detail of the the figures riding on the griffins. Those who ride upon the mixed birds and beasts, bearing staves with pendants falling from their tops, on which portrayed the arms of the two sheriffs. So you've got quite a strong visual picture there of these two figures holding these wooden staves with the flags flying.
Yes, we have a beautiful sea chariot, and again, possibly reutilising basic structures that are adorned specifically for things.
Well, hang on. It's the chariot, it specifically says it's of no usual form or figure. So it might be a new chariot.
It might be. It might be.
1633 model.
Angela.
So if the clockworkers haven't had anything since the 1590s, then the griffins it is the first time we've seen griffins. So they are unusual because, of course, they're a mix of, beast and bird. So it could potentially mean that, because nobody's seen them for a really long time.
Yes, yes, I don't think we've had. Have we had griffins before? I don't have any specific memories of griffins.
Well, that would explain the speech where he explains in great detail what a griffin is, and that it can just swoop down and snatch your harnessed horse with a man on it and just eat it.
We certainly haven't had a wolf.
I think
I'd love to know how you adapt your dolphin from last year into a griffin. You must have to nail bits off, to kind of give it.
Well, say we do suspect that that some of the basic structures that are used are being reused. They strip them down and then they completely refurnish them. Though whether that's what's happening here or not. With griffins, are they just butchering different animals and splicing them together in some sort of a terrifying amalgam, rather than starting from scratch? Who knows? Who knows? I'll go to Rachel, then Eric, I think.
No, the griffin thing. I think it gives a different. Talking about the Golden Fleece and like those Hercules myths that pop up in these from time to time. It's kind of a different take. I want to say, just because the never mind, I got it confused with that Herculean lion thing, but that their thing is their symbol is like a part of a lion, and it's they work with cloth and it relates into that Hercules myth. And then I was just going to say, I wonder why some of these myths are the ones that they stick to, like that, like this Golden Fleece instead of like the other one with Arachne versus Athena, and the competitiveness of, cloth making or something. Or maybe is it just the material that they work with in that myth that's most important?
Any thoughts on that? I'll go to Eric in a moment. Angela?
Well, I was just going to say that's a really good point, because but we'll need Tracey to confirm this, that the cloth workers do work largely with wool, because wool was originally the great staple of England, and then the mercers, they're all dealing with foreign fabrics like silk and all the rest of it. Would that be right? So I think Rachel's right here.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were formed in the 16th century of two pre-existing companies, one of which was the shearsmen. So they're very much, hands-on, if you like, wool people, or were anyway.
Eric.
I was just gonna mention in response to the water engines thing, maybe that relates to what he had a few years. Well, I mean, a few years in relation to the text, in text time, where he had like Scylla and Charybdis is like in 1 year, where he had Ulysses have to go through them, and the whole sending the dove and blah blah blah. Maybe that's what he had in mind.
Yeah, so we do have things that have been used in previous years that might be referring to, because we have absolutely right with snakes and dragons spitting fire, vomiting water, and we have had other slightly less elaborate things. So it might be that's what's going on there. It could be something very different. It doesn't. Sadly, Heywood isn't interested in giving us those details. Just that there is a thing that he mentions in passing. He shall not need to swell my his pages by reciting other things as well, which he does move us on in different directions. Any other thoughts before we look at the next couple of shows? Eric?
Also, you can tell that he really likes this Lord Mayor, because he hasn't really said things like, you must be, vigilant and diligent and all the adjectives that he used like the years before. He hasn't used any of that. He just sort of goes, well, you have to stay alert. That's about it. He doesn't really give a huge list.
It's very company orientated. It's really sort of reminding everyone that what this livery company is all about, rather than really aiming stuff directly too much at him. Or am I misreading that thought? Okay, let's move forward then. So, second show, what ordering shall we do here? Eric, if you could read the opening speech. Angela, if you can read the next paragraph. We read of 2. Greg, if you could be Mercury. That'd be lovely. Liza, if you could be the third show. Which I'm sure you will enjoy, and then we'll briefly pause before we go into the final moments. Eric, take it away. Second show.
The second show by land, presented in the upper end of Cheapside, is a ship, most proper to the trade of merchant adventurers. Neither know I whom more aptly to employ as pilot therein than Mercury, whom the poets feign not only to be Diacturus or Internuntius betwixt the gods and men, as also leader of the Graces, the inventor of wrestling, the deviser of letters, the patron of eloquence, etc. I can add many more. From whence he hath sundry attributes and denominations conferred upon him. But he's also termed the god of barter, buying, selling, and commerce in all merchandise whatsoever.
We read of 2 only employed by the gods in embassy unto men, namely Iris and Mercury. The difference betwixt their employments is that Iris, for the most part, commanded by Juno as being her chief attendant, and never by the rest of the gods, unless to foretell war, famine, pestilence, or some strange disaster. And Mercury was negotiated but in sports, pastimes, marriage feasts, solemn meetings, shows, ovations, triumphs, spectacles of the like nature, and therefore more proper to this day's employment. He is figured like a young man, fresh-coloured and beardless, in his right hand holding a golden purse, in his left a cadazeucus, a rod with 2 snakes twined and internoded about it, their heads meeting at the top, and their tails at the bottom, which the Egyptians held to be an emblem of peace. And in ancient days, great men employed in the affairs of state or foreign embassies bore such staves, from whence they were called caducatores. He wears wings upon his hat and heels, intimating his celerity, and behind him stands a cock, denoting his vigilancy. So much for the person. I come now to his speech.
I, Mercury, the patron of all trade, of traffic and commerce, am this day made a speaker from the gods. For my quick motion can sail as well upon the land as ocean. And who the merchant better can assure than Mercury, the lord of Mercatura? To you this day with state and power endowed, whose winged ships all foreign seas have ploughed, and Morga surge gurst, or tempestuous flaw, discovered what our pole star never saw. They from cold Arctos to the burning zone have washed their keels to find out lands unknown, crossing the boreal and the austral lines to view the set and rise of all the signs. To you whose factors in both Indies lie, the east and west, all parts both far and nigh, who sometimes up then down the Volga steer, to know in must go what is cheap or dear, and what Hesperian Targus can afford to enrich this noble island, take aboard. There's nothing the brave Persian can hold rare, but hither brought by your great cost and care. The potent Turk, although in faith adverse, is proud that he with England can commerce. What Geneva, Lucca, Florence, Naples yields, what grows or is found through all the Latian fields, what is in China, Greece, or almost sold, that diamond worthy to be set in gold. For Norway, Dansk, France, Spain, the Netherlands, what's best in them comes frequent to our hands. And for our transportage of some surplus ware, our own wants furnished, what we can best can spare. No rarity for profit or for pleasure, brought to us in abundant measure. To this brave isle, by Neptune moated round, you give a wall, not fixed on any ground, but moving between the ocean and the air, which as you build, so yearly you repair. And though a wooden fabric so well knit that should invasive force once menace it, with loud-voiced thunder mixed with sulphurous flame, 'twould sink or send them back with fear and shame. Grave sir, no other precedent you need to follow now than him whom you succeed. Next on your motto think, so happy prove, let your trust be in him that reigns above.
The third show by land is a model devised for sport, to humour the throng who come rather to see than to hear. And without some such intruded anti-mask, many who carry their ears in their eyes will not stick to say, I will not give a pin for the show. Since therefore it consists only in motion, action, and agitation, and these expressed to the life being apparently visible to all, in vain should I employ a speaker, where I presuppose all his words would be drowned in noise and laughter. I therefore pass to the fourth and last.
Which is just a repeating last session's bit of there's a spectacle thing, nothing to do with me. Apparently you have to have them. I didn't even bother putting a speech in. Cheers for that. Some detail would have been lovely, because we weren't there. Thank you, Heywood. Any thoughts about the second show? Obviously, we can't say anything about the third show because we've got no data. Any thoughts about Mercury, his speech, and his presumably massive cock? I'm assuming it's not a small cock. I'm just assuming it's Sorry, it's been that kind of day.
Rob, it's called a caduceus.
Well, it says there stands a cock denoting his vigilancy.
Exactly, he does. He has a cock. The cock shows his vigilancy because it crows. It makes sure you're awake. He absolutely does have a cock.
He's got a cock.
I don't know how big it is, but he's definitely got one.
We've had an operated cock before. I don't know if it's the same cock, but it's there's a cock.
Well, it makes sense to reuse the same one if you had a good time with it last time.
Exactly.
It was another list, was what I was going to say before you floored me.
Yes, and this is very interested in trade and the wider world, making various comments, and that which again is appropriate for Mercury. Any thoughts in the room, Angela?
Well, it's just struck me that of course the cock, which has been introduced, I wonder if the cock's got something to do with the third show, which is for the throng. He's slightly less rude about them this time than he was last time. At least they get promoted to just be throng, because it would be definitely one that would create a lot of noise, wouldn't it? And fun and laughter.
It's weird because, I mean, the data we do have about this third show is, let's see, it says a model devised for sport to humor the throng. So are there actors, or are we talking about machinery? Are we talking about something that moves with the wheels of its cart? Is that why you can't have a speaker, not just because of the noise and laughter of the throng, but of the sound of whatever is moving? Say maybe a cock going up and down. So.
Yeah.
I mean, Heywood is the only person who mentions these kinds of, sort of semi-attached, detached entertainments, and I can think it's probably some sort of random street entertainer, maybe acrobat or something like that. You do get very, very occasional passing mentions of them in the records. Maybe a cloud, green man, a giant, or something like that. They were certainly around.
Other thoughts, Stephen? We'll move on in a moment. Eric after Stephen.
I'm sure I can't quite recall the exact quote now, but I'm sure somewhere Heywood writes very much about this. But in terms of the theatre, that the thing that's wrong with the theatre is precisely this kind of stuff that he can't be bothered with. That it's sort of special effects, as it were. Visuals are special effects for the idiots who don't get all my clever classical references.
God, you wouldn't want them stuck. Him and Ben Jonson in a pub would just be murder.
Well, on the other hand, they'd be happy all night and they wouldn't bore anyone else.
Yeah, that's true. Eric.
Citations.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I love the expressions he uses for things, especially for when he's describing, the throng, like sort of many who carry their ears in their eyes and will not stick to say, I will not give a pin for the show. It's just, yeah, you can imagine him like sort of saying that angrily.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's it.
Okay.
It's an interesting concept.
Yeah. I'll very briefly, Rachel.
Did he? I don't. I was just gonna ask. Does Heywood? Is he like, what do you call it? Nobility or something? Why is it that he seems to always be talking about like the proletariat or something, like in a derogatory way?
He went to Cambridge, don't you know?
Yes, it's worse. He got a bit of an education, and yeah.
Welcome to the British class system.
Yeah.
So wait, is he born gentry, nobility? Is his dad a tradesman? What's up with him?
I don't think, no, he's not gentry. He's from rural Lincolnshire, so I think he just pitches up. He might have been a young. I need to check the DNA. He might have been a younger son. But yeah, I'll check and I'll come back to you.
Anyway, we have the fourth show by the land, and then we go into the speech at night after the festivities are all over, and the Lord Mayor saunters back to bed and is harangued by additional speeches and the various pageants aligned. So the fourth show by land, I'll ask Rachel to begin with the first paragraph. I'll ask Stephen to do the list that follows, the first Prudence, next Tempest, etc. Angela, if you could read Prudence. Liza, the next big bit of prose, and then Eric, if you can do the speech at night, and we'll complete the text. So the fourth show by land, please.
Okay. I'm here. What is curious and neatly framed architect, beautified with many proper and becoming ornaments, bearing the title of the Bower of Bliss, an emblem of that future happiness, which not only all just and upright magistrates, but every good man, of what condition or quality soever in the course of his life, especially aimeth at. I dwell not on the description thereof, I will only illustrate the purpose for the which it was intended. This pageant is adorned with 4 persons, which represent the 4 cardinal virtues, which are behoveful unto all who enter into any eminent place or office: prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude, which are so concatenated amongst themselves that the one cannot subsist without the other. The first prudence reformeth abuses past, ordereth affairs present, and foreseeth dangers future. Further, as Cicero observes, justice without prudence is resolved into cruelty, temperance into fury, fortitude into tyranny. Next, temperance, which as Hermes saith, is rich in losses, confident in perils, prudent in assaults, and happy in itself. As a man cannot be temperate unless he be prudent, so none can be truly valiant unless he be temperate. Neither can justice exist without temperance, since no man can be truly just who hath not his breast freed from all perturbations.
And we'll pass over to Stephen.
Then justice, which according to Cicero is the badge of virtue, the staff of peace, the maintenance of honour. Moreover, justice and order are the preservers of the world's peace. The just magistrate is in his word faithful, in his thought sincere, in his heart upright, without fear of any but God and his prince, without hate of any but the wicked and irregular. Last, fortitude, which, as Epictetus observes, is the companion of justice, and never contendeth but in righteous actions, condemneth peril, despiseth calamities, and conquers death. Briefly, fortitude without prudence is but rashness. Prudence without justice is but craftiness. Justice without temperance, but tyranny. Temperance without fortitude, but folly. Amongst the rest of these of the persons placed in this structure are the 3 theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity, as handmaids attending to conduct all such pious and religious magistrates the way to the celestial bower of bliss, of which this is but a mere representation and sign, who aim at that glorious place, lest they in any way deviate from the true path that leadeth unto it. I proceed to the speech.
Grave Praetor, with your censors, sheriffs elected and now in place, it is from you expected that, having your authority from kings and many 100 years since, all such things as custom by time strengthened hath made good, you should maintain with all your livelihood, which that you will perform, we doubt the less. When we consider who's your patroness, the holy and blessed Virgin, further, this fabric before you placed, the bower of bliss. If we to greater, less things may compare these present, but the petty symbols are of what is future. For bare prudence here, pent and confined in humane knowledge, there shall be reduced to wisdom that's divine. Temperance, which is bare abstinence, shall shine in clarity immaculate. Justice, which oft sways the balance so that to the rich it almost inclines, shall by an equal scale, leaning nor this nor that way, so prevail that right in glorious star wreaths shall be crowned, and injury in tenebrous lethe drowned. Brave fortitude, which chiefly does subsist in opposition of the antagonist, whether that he the body's mortal state seek to supplant or soul insidiate, shall stand impugnable, and thenceforth be fined and repaired to all eternity. When you arrive at yon celestial tower, which aptly may be titled Freeman's Bower, the way to find which through these virtues lies called cardinal. The steps by which to rise these graces show, faith, hope, and love attend you, who on their unseen wings shall soon ascend you. These, when all earth's pomp fails, your prayers shall bring where saints and angels hallelujahs sing.
I cannot, without just taxation of ingratitude, omit to speak something of this worshipful company of the cloth workers, at whose sole charge the triumphs of this day were celebrated. For the master, the wardens, and the committee, chosen to see all things accommodated for this business then in motion, I cannot but much commend both for their affability and courtesy, especially unto myself, being at that time to them all a mere stranger, who, when I read my then unperfect papers, were as able to judge of them, as attentively to hear them, and rather judicially considering all things than nicely carping at anything, as willing to have them furthered for his honour to whom they are dedicate, as careful to see them performed to their own reputation and credit, in both which there was wanting in them neither encouragement nor bounty, and as they were unwilling in any vainglory to show new precedents to such that should succeed them, so they were loath out of parsimony to come short of any who went before them. Less I could not speak in modesty, and more I forbear to utter, lest I might incur the imputation of flattery. I come now to the 12 celestial signs, which may aptly be applied unto the 12 months during the Lord Mayor's government.
Sleep may you soundly, sir. Tomorrow pressed to a year's trouble for this one night's rest, in which many stars and planets all conspire to warm you so by their celestial fire. Ares, whose gold fleece Greece doth so renown, may both enrich you in this glorious town, that Taurus in your strength may so appear, you in this weight may on your shoulders bear, that the two twins, the mother's blessed increase, may in this city still continue peace, that Cancer, who incites to hate and spleen, may not in your fair government be seen, that Leo, waiting on your judgment seat, may moderate his rage and scorching heat, that the celestial maid may you advise virgins and orphans still to patronize, and rather than your justice here should fail, Libra no more be seen with golden scale, and that the scorpion's sting may be so charmed that poor may not be wronged nor innocent harmed, that Chiron's bent bow so may guide your will, you may still aim but never shoot to kill, and Capricorn, though all things said to dare, though he have power yet may have will to spare, that as Aquarius doth his water power, you may your goodness on this city shower. Pisces, the last of 12, the feet they guide, from head to foot, oh, may you so provide.
I conclude with the excellent artist, Mr. Gerald Christmas, whose worth being not to be questioned as a prime master in his profession. I am of opinion that there is not any about the town who can go beyond him, of whom I may boldly speak, that as art is an help to nature, so his experience is, and hath been an extension to the trial and perfection of art. Therefore let every man in his way strive to be eminent, according to that of Ovid, tu depont artibus ingenuus questia est gloria multis finis. Thank you very much, Mr. Christmas. Despite what I think of the multitude, you did some sterling work. And once again, he had great time with the committee. The committee got it. They did okay.
I love the detail. I've never noticed this before. He actually says that he read out from his papers, and I guess this would have been what this book then became. So he would have been standing there in Cloth Workers' Hall reading out some of these speeches and describing what the devices were like and so on. I think that's just that's a wonderful little extra detail, actually. It confirms everything I've always thought about the relationship between the commission and the printed book.
Yeah, his then unperfect papers as well. You know, it's that pitch of trying to figure out what he's going to do.
The
And
draft.
there was competition for this show, and there certainly was the following year. I'll say more about that in a minute. So yeah.
And I do love that. At the opening of that speech of night, I like that idea, you know, you're going to get one night's good sleep because the rest of the year you're going to be quite busy. And that's quite nicely put. I quite like that. Other thoughts from the room before we close this year and leap ahead? Angela?
I just thought, what a sad irony that the last bit's all about the 12 months and he didn't make it through all 12 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Christmas didn't either. He died that year too.
Oh.
Oh no. Well, we'll always have his ostrich.
Well, yeah. I mean, the company kept that one, but yeah, his son's carried on his his good practices. So there are still Christmases, don't we?
There's always Christmases in the Lord Mayor's show.
Until they banned them, obviously, in 47.
Rachel.
I was gonna bring up that the speech at night about the 12 zodiac, the 12 companies and all of them, and how the cloth makers or workers are the 12th company guild, and Pisces is the 12th sign, and it's like the mutable like last sign, and it's supposed to be very weak or something. So I think well, it's not supposed to be very weak, but it's just supposed to be a tricky sign. So I think that's very interesting that it puts them as, Pisces. And I wonder who the rest of the signs are supposed to represent.
Yes, I like the reference to Pisces guiding the feet. I mean, the sort of broad umbrella of medical or physical science at this point had all sorts of weird correspondences with the Paracelsian ones with Greco-Roman gods, and then some zodiacal correspondences. And this is what you get when you employ a court astrologer, which James did not, though Elizabeth did.
Yes, there's a sort of humorous quality to a lot of that, isn't there? Other thoughts?
Cancer who incites to hate and spleen.
Other thoughts before we leap forward a year? Eric?
Just some of the rhymes in this are a bit forced, like spleen and scene, or seat and heat, and it's like, well, yeah, you can tell that he was like, yes, I will rhyme every single line. It just, yeah. It's also in the first speech that was, what do you call it? I think it was, he repeated the concept just so he could rhyme it. I can't remember what the line was, but oh yeah, Isis met and then like led or something. Drawn or led by your own griffins, and it's like, surely if they can see what's going on, the guy in the chariot does not need to describe what's going on. It's just a matter of rhyme. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just grumpy about the rhyme now.
Okay, any additional grumpiness, because we're going to a totally different writer now. A year passes. We are in to the 29th of October once again, 1634. And this time it's not Heywood. This time it is written by John Taylor. And I'm going to ask Liza, as is our wont, to read the title page and the opening dedication as well, please, as we get a sense of what this new year is all going to be like.
The dedication, the poem as well as the prose? Okay. The triumphs of fame and honor, or the noble accomplished solemnity full of cost, art, and state at the inauguration and establishment of the true, worthy, and right nobly minded Robert Parkhurst into the right honourable office of Lord Mayor of London. The particularities of every invention in all the pageants, shows, and triumphs, both by water and land, are here following fully set down, being all performed by the loves, liberal costs, and charges of the right worshipful and worthy brotherhood of the cloth workers, the 29th of October, 1634, written by John Taylor, imprinted at London, 1634. To the most welcome and expected pattern and patron of virtue and goodness, the hopeful deserver of all the costs and honours which the noble fellowship and brotherhood of cloth workers, and ample love of the whole city in full and generous bounty bestow upon him, the right honourable and judicious Robert Pankhurst, Lord Mayor of the famous city of London. Right honourable patron, to your state, in duty, I these triumphs dedicate, wherein your worthy brotherhood approves greatness and goodness of their minds and loves. Their true affections and their liberal charge they have most bountiful expressed at large. And London in these triumphs is renowned above all cities in the world's wide round. For no king's deputy or magistrate is with such pompous state inaugurate as London's mayor is, which most plainly shows the king's illustrious greatness, whence it flows. To whom then should my dedication run, but unto you for whom these things were done? Your power is London's watchtower to espy dangers far off and perils that are nigh. Your foresight must see much, and it is plain millions of eyes will look on you again, for envy and detraction prize and stares to assault true honour and to entrap in snares all that is good. For it is manifest that envy always feeds upon the best. This city, the king's chamber, must be kept clean for his use, from foul pollution swept. And sure that power that hath you thus advanced to be thus honoured, loved, and countenanced will ever be your portion and content, and govern you in this your government, that you at helm a steady course may steer twixt justice and blessed mercy. Many a year, especially in this your greatest state, let hospitality still keep your gate, and liberality with welcome stand to greet men with a free and open hand. Then muses, graces, arts the praise shall sing of you, my lord lieutenant to my king.
And thus we come to the end of that dedication. It's a very interesting stylistic shift. I'm liking this John Taylor. So John Taylor writing for Robert Parkhurst. It's the cloth workers again, in a sense that it's the do-over for the cloth workers in the complexities of presumably losing their previous mayor the midway through his term. What do we know about Robert Parkhurst? What do we know about John Taylor?
Well, John Taylor, wow. He's a ledge. Parkhurst was kind of local man from Guildford originally. Usual, story involved a lot of the merchant companies. But he was also an MP, which is, don't think we've come across one who's been an MP before. So he had a kind of a finger in the parliamentarian pie as well as the civic pie, if you like. That's a terrible metaphor. Sorry, scratch that. Taylor, well, this is the only Lord Mayor's show that's been associated with Taylor. However, he did compete against Heywood for the Lord Mayor's show on a couple of occasions, and indeed this year Taylor and Norman, his collaborator, underbid Heywood and Christmas Junior by about I think it's £10 or something. So Taylor is on the fringes in the early 1630s, putting his arm in but not quite getting the job until this year he gets it.
Lovely. Okay, let's find out what it is he writes. He doesn't do any opening bump. In fact, all of the explication of what his pageants are about is towards the end of the text. So we're going to primarily be getting detail. So we'll go into the first show on the water, and is it on the water, or is it just the first show? First and second pageants, as noted here. So we'll ask Rachel to read the first bit of prose. Stephen, if you could do the first speech. Eric, then the rowers. And Greg, if you can do the second is a pageant. And Angela, if you can do the speech of time. And then we will pause, I think. So, Rachel, then Stephen, Eric, Greg, Angela.
The first show that is to be presented on the water is a vessel like a boat or barge, adorned with the arms and impresses of the Honourable City and Company, with seeming properties of being loaden, with packs, dry fats, and divers other commodities, that merchants and other that are free of the company of cloth workers do receive from foreign parts by sea. This barge attends the Lord Mayor and meets him about Paul's Wharf, or attends further up the river. Thestis, the goddess of the sea, and Thames, or Thamesis, being one of her fairest daughters, sitting in the head of the boat. Thestis being habilimented in a mantle of sea green, with a coronet of shells of diverse sorts of sea fish on her head, with a great whelk fish in her hand, with adornments of strange fishes and other significant representations. Thamesis being habited in a white or silver colored robe, having on her head a chaplet of green reeds, flowers, and rushes, and about her feet decked with sedge, bulrushes, and flags, at which presentment Thestis speaks this following speech.
Know, worthy troop, that I, great Thetis, am, who, hearing of these triumphs, hither came from the azure court of my most deep abyss to grace my fairest daughter, Thamesis. I every 12 hours by this child of mine do send your silks and velvets, oil and wine, gold, silver, jewels, fish, salt, sundry spices, fine and coarse linen, drugs of divers prices, what every realm or climate can produce, I see it safe transported for your use. Thus from the bosom of the deep, my floods by Thames do every tide send up your goods, for which this matchless, well-deserving river your cloth doth back again to me deliver, with other riches, which I o'er the sea unto my other daughters do convey. For your commodities I'll ever flow unto Danubis, Ister, Rhine, and Po, to Maes, Seine, Volga, Ems, Elbe, and Tanalis, to Tigris, Nilus, Ganges, Euphrates, to Tiber, Jordan, Xanthus, Indus, Tagus, past Asphaltites to Black Mortus, Lacuus, as far as Sol or Cynthia spread their beams, as far as Oceanus sends his streams, so far will I your servant ever be in anything you'll deign to put on me. And humble thanks, fair Thames, and I do render to you, who of her welfare are so tender, who with great cost and care do lend your hands to clear your servant Thames from shells and sands. Go on and cleanse her as you have begun, and she shall do for you as she hath done. We are assured that heaven will ever bless your stores who do her injuries redress. Thetis and Thames their services shall show to you as long as they do ebb and flow. Thus with our humble duteous bending down, long may this city flourish with renown.
Then the rowers, consisting of 4 in number, being 2 sailors and 2 watermen, being overjoyed, pike their oars, and every one of them drinks his can as a health, tossing them up, and presently falling into rugged frisken dance, return to Paul's Wharf. On landing the said barge, she is carried as the foremost pageant in the show through the city.
The second is a pageant representing the figures of Time and Mercury, Time being habited in a blue robe with his scythe in his hand, which do wait and attend the Lord Mayor in Paul's churchyard. The speakers being mounted on 2 griffins, the supporters of the clothworkers' arms, which at the approach of my Lord Mercury upon one of the griffins, with his caudicus or charming rod in his hand, with wings on his head to signify quickness of invention, acuteness of wit, and volubility of tongue, with eloquence of speech. He hath also wings on his feet to signify his swiftness as messenger to the gods. Time speaketh as follows.
Almost 500 days beheld have I the triumphs of great London's mayoralty, and sure old Time with joy doth truly say he ne'er was better pleased than at this day. Not that I think a temporizing lord or pleaser of the time shall wield the sword, but as your honourable predecessors have mended time by punishing transgressors, so time hopes that the addition of your year will make him more illustrate, pure and clear. For of all fading things, 'tis manifest, as time is used, he's either worst or best. All those that rightly have their honours won have used time well, as you, my lord, have done. This honour was ordained you from your youth. You ever loved my loveliest daughter, Truth. And she hath raised you, and she did prefer you to this dignity to maintain her. I do command her still with you to abide. Do you defend her, she shall be your guide. For truth's sake, time shall be your servant still, and in your just commands obey your will. Time shall transport your merchandise and wares. Time shall assist you in your greatest affairs. Time shall always be yours auspiciously, and time will bring you to eternity. Here's Hermes from his sphere's circumference, hath brought the poet wit and eloquence and quick invention. Likewise, he inflamed into the artists that these pageants framed, that for your future honour this may be a day of well-composed variety, of speech and show. These triumphs we present, we hope, as they are meant, shall give content. We humbly wish that you this year may find full of true worth, as is your worthy mind.
Next, and near to this pageant of time and Mercury, is the form of a city, representing London with walls, battlements, gates, churches, towers, steeples and lofty buildings, and some antique shapes here and there on the tops of the highest edifices. Also with shops and men to work upon cloth, as cloth workers, fullers, shearmen and others, the walls of the city being adorned round with arms and escutcheons of the city and company, as also diverse figures as of antiquity record memory, wisdom, and others the like. Also an ancient matron in a civil grave robe, with her hair long, hanging down in trammels, dishevelled behind her back, sitting in one of the gates of the city. She speaks in the person of London to the Lord Mayor and company as followeth, and I'll throw that to Liza. London.
By me, fair London, in obedience shows the service, love, and duty that she owes to this day's triumph. But my aim is higher. My thankfulness doth up to heaven aspire, which unto me hath so propitious been that I do see this day, and now am seen the queen of cities, empress of content, and princess of unmatched government. Weigh well my state, and think on other states. Thebes is ruined with her 100 gates. Numantia, Carthage, great Jerusalem, and Babylon, what are become of them? Constantinople doth in sorrow lie, and groan beneath the Turkish tyranny. Rome, and all cities that hold Rome supreme, their glories are eclipsed, or but a dream. Whilst fire and sword doth Germany molest, London's secure with peace and plenty best. Turk, Pope, and war bear here no rule or sway, for I, one God, one King, one law obey. There's my security, and my state doth stand supported by the unsupported hand. These are the means and instruments whereby we rise to honour painful industry. An idle citizen is like a moth. One spoils by example, the other spoils the cloth. True citizens are the true city's sons. The others are but bastards, mad that runs like runagates or cursed imps of Cain, and never shall to honour's seat attain. Work on, my lads, and you in time may be good members of this honoured company. And though good freeman of this corporation, deceased before his half-year's expiration, yet heaven hath soon provided for our good another worthy of this brotherhood. And now, my lord, I give myself and mine to your command and charge, and I divine that as great is the honor of your seat, your government shall be more good than great.
I wanted to keep running on because I was enjoying that so much. It's just really bouncing along very nicely. There's all sorts of things. I particularly like the happy rowers falling into a rugged friskin dance. I think that should be obligatory in all Lord Mayor shows. And reuse of the griffins and a few other bits and bobs from the previous year, but. Hey, they've got in 2 years in a row. Why not recycle some of the imagery that they've presumably commissioned the first time round? Thoughts from the room. I'm really liking John Taylor. I wish he wrote more. Angela, and then Stephen.
You had to work out how did he save the 10 quid that he didn't put on his quote. It would be quite easy to do that. First of all, there's the remaking of the, reusing of the things, all of them. So that's one thing. But the other thing that he's got his mates to join in. So he hasn't employed anybody else. He's only got watermen who are doing the dancing and the singing and all the rest of it. They're probably all done it for nothing and a beer. And that's what they're doing while they're dancing. They're having the beer that he's promised them.
Stephen. Sorry, Liza, yes.
Well, I don't want to talk over Stephen. It was just then the watermen take the watermen take the water pageant and it becomes the leading pageant by land. It sort of wheels ahead of all the other pageants.
Yeah, we've had that before. That first pageant for the water either ends up on a barge, he's on a barge and then gets wheeled off and reused. Or is on the side. Reusing, that's relatively common. I think it's just we haven't heard about it recently because Heywood doesn't go into those kind of details. We could assume that it probably appears elsewhere a lot of the time. Sorry, Stephen.
I was just wondering about the royalism thing. Firstly, it was part of Taylor's sort of brand, wasn't it? In a sense, he called himself the King's, whatever it was, water poet or whatever. But we're into the personal rule now, aren't we? So I'm wondering if there are kind of valences to this royalism. So personal rule is kind of just Charles ruling on his own. And there's that last speech there has got stuff about, true citizens. It does remind me a little bit of going back to the 1590s and the kind of, the true citizens of London defend it against X, Y, Z. So I don't know, it's just an open question, really. I wonder if, there's kind of abstract royalism, but is this sort of historically inflected at all, or is it just kind of common or garden royalism? Or is it just him doing his brand?
I think it's certainly that. I don't know. There's that line. Here's my security, and my state doth stand up, supported by the unsupported hand. I one God, one King, one law. I don't know. Maybe Steve, you're onto something there. There's some sort of indication there that Charles is enough. The unsupported. I don't know.
Yeah, go, Liza.
Did anyone else? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt Tracey if she wasn't done. All right. I just, while I was reading that, I thought, God, these people have no idea what's about to hit them. And do we have any idea what's about to hit us?
Yes. Well, we're taking enough knocks as it is. Angela.
Well, I just wanted to say something about the historical sort of business here. Interestingly, when we looked at an earlier pageant during the personal rule, that was also really full of the King's power and how important he was and all the rest of it. So in that sense, this is a continuation. But John Taylor isn't just calling himself the king. So he has been working really hard on getting to know courtiers around Charles. And when later he becomes a spokesman for the royalists, this is because he's built up all these connections. So he really is quite connected in this weird kind of peripheral way to the court. So it's quite fascinating, actually, how that relationship's happened. And I do wonder whether he was able to pull a few strings to get him this gig, which would be interesting as well. Although I don't know, he didn't make money out of that, so he was quite often short of money, even so.
Eric?
I'm just wondering about the line, your government shall be more good than great. Is that like sort of don't become too famous or something, or I don't know?
The office is more... It's a really interesting line. I was wondering, is that just a slight shift in the weight of the meaning? It's just, it seems... the great is the honour of your seat. The office is more important than you are, but you'll be a good person, but you can't be a great person because you're only in office for a while. Great people are there for the duration. Because it does sound a bit like an insult. Though I'm sure it isn't intended that way. Stephen?
Could it just sort of mean gooder? As in, this is a great office, but should be even better than the nature of the office. So I know what you mean. It's kind of like, like more honoured, in the breach, as it were. But I wonder if it's just sort of, an intensifier.
Your government shall be more good than great. Yeah. Okay. Yes, that works. Yes, I think that's a fair reading. Because it didn't scan that way that first time round. So yes, that's good. Good to clarify. Rachel.
Maybe he's talking about the power. No, I don't know. I was gonna say maybe it's like, great as in like Alexander the Great, or somebody who's like a conqueror that they talk about forever, but it's not necessarily that he had a positive impact on the world. And he's saying that he'll bring goodness into the world, but it's not one of those things that people will remember forever.
We will gather some more information. I'm really enjoying the flow of this. It's bouncing along very nicely. I'll ask Stephen to read the next chunk of description. Greg, if you could do the speech of honour. Liza, there's a short bit of prose prior to the speech of Endymion. I'll ask Eric to read Endymion, please. And then Rachel, after there's some dancing shepherds, I'll ask you to... no, we'll pause before we go to the bit after that. But Rachel will follow after that, but we'll pause first. So, Stephen, more pageants, please.
The next is a pageant in the form of a tower, which doth import a tower of honour, on the top of which tower sits one in royal robes, with a majestic impalement on his head, a sceptre in one hand and a ball in the other. Under him, in the next descent, sit in equal distances the figures of a Lord Mayor, a bishop, a lawyer, and a warlike captain or general. In the right hand of the Lord Mayor is placed the figure or emblem of honour. Next the bishop is placed piety, or the fear of God. On the right hand of the judge, a figure representing power is seated, and by the general or captain stands victory. In the descent below the Lord Mayor is an apprentice, and by him stands obedience. Beneath the bishop is a scholar, and by him is placed patience. Under the judge, a clerk, and by him diligence. And under the Lord General is a common soldier, and by him is placed virtue, which shows that by virtuous actions and true industry, mean men have ascended and may be raised to honourable places, which is an encouragement and pattern for others to pursue and follow those most worthy ways to honour and renown. The tower being round or circular, and the basis or groundwork square or quadrangle, on each corner whereof sits the four prime or cardinal virtues, namely justice, fortitude, temperance, and prudence, every one of them habited in robes, significant and emblematically showing that those virtues do adorn and dignify the above presented noble personages. This pageant attending my Lord Mayor in Paul's churchyard, or at the upper end of Cheapside, near the little conduit, he that sits highest in the place and person of honour speaks this, following speech.
The speech of honour. Low steps begin to mount the highest hills. Great rivers have their heads from little rills. From servitude grows freedom, and from thence, through industry, springs worth and eminence. All such as will true honour's seat ascend must do as these have, first obey and bend. For though humility to man seems low, the fruit of it is as high as heaven doth grow. 'Tis diligence doth the puny clerk prefer to be a reverend judge or counsellor. Pains and much peril oft obtains the grace. A common soldier gains a general's place. The poorest scholar's study, by degrees, ascends the height of spiritual dignities, and from the apprentice 7 years' servitude proceeds the grave gown and the livery hood, till, in the end, by merit, pains, and care, they win the grace to sit in honour's chair. Thus humble service is advanced and reared, to honour's seat obeyed, beloved, and feared. Authority is the touchstone of the mind, and shows which way the bearer is inclined. For having power joined to his will, it makes him much more good or much more ill. It makes him to foresee with judgment's eye that justice without mercy is cruelty, that mercy without justice is much worse. Breeds scorn, contempt, makes power to lease her force. When you in scales of equity do lie, the sword of justice who dares but obey? Your faith and honour are in marriage joined by oath this day, which no man can unbind. Therefore, my lord, whose service and true merit have made this honour yours, which you inherit, to treble that joy. Sorry, I just lost my place. 'Tis treble joy that you do wisely know, to mix those virtues well and to bestow them justly as occasion shall incite, to guard the good and make wrong render right, in which expectance all our hopes abounding, joy crown this day with drums and trumpets sounding.
And Liza.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm also in the wrong place. My record tonight hasn't been good. I apologize, and I expect being publicly shamed in some way. Then, his lordship being come to St. Lawrence Lane End in Cheapside, he is saluted by Endymion, or a shepherd riding on a ram's back, the ram being the crest of the clothworker's arms, there being near or next unto him an ancient monument of fame. At the approach of my lord, the shepherd entertains him with this speech.
My honoured lord, let me, a rural swain and humble shepherd from the lowly plain, as plainly bid thee welcome to the state of England's greatest civil magistrate. A shepherd joys to see this day, and I will I will fleece my flocks to enrich thy company. I am Endymion, that of yore did keep upon the Arcadian hills my harmless sheep, where, as by study and by observations, I found the moon's change and her variations. And for my sake the swains do still prefer the book I clipped, the shepherd's calendar. Apollo kept Admetus' sheep, 'tis said, and Tamburlaine, whom mighty kings obeyed, was once a shepherd. And the time was when that shepherds were the noblest, ablest men. This golden-crested ram on which I ride to welcome you and see you dignified is the celestial sign Aries by name, come from the zodiac to adorn your fame, and from the ram and his increasing breed, near half mankind have means to clothe and feed. By picking wool thousands relief do gain, as many carding spinning doth maintain. Woolmen a great and wealthy trade do drive, weavers in great abundance work and live. The clothiers, fullers, tuckers, shearmen, dyers, from the sheep's fleece have feeding and attires. But all these trades which I do here infer have all relation to the cloth worker. For it were not for him, the rest were nothing. He only makes a cloth and fit for clothing. Without the cloth worker, the draper's trade and merchant's traffic would decay and fade. These from the fleece get for clothes and nutriment, for under heaven the ram's the instrument. And when bright Phoebus shall in March begin to take the ram for his celestial inn, shall such golden tincture on his fleece he'll set, which many golden pieces shall beget. And whereas men, to make their worths appear, they'll do their servants' liveries do give their servants liveries once a year. The ram in bounty passeth man, I note, and gives his master every year a coat. Thus poor Endymion with the beast he rides doth issue prosperous winds and happy tides, that by commerce and good negotiation wool turned to cloth and cloth by transformation be turned to gold, that you may say with joy that Jason's fleece to yours was but a toy.
And there's a dance of shepherds with drinking in leather bottles to the monument. So likes to have some dancing shepherds, dancing people generally. Nice to see. So we've gone from this pageant in the form of a tower, these various staggered things. That started out at the upper end of Cheapside near the little conduit, and this second one with Endymion here, with the shepherds, etc., is further along. The Lawrence Lane end is much closer to the Guildhall. So yeah, all sorts of references being thrown in here. Reference to Tamburlaine, who was once a shepherd, or at least according to Marlowe he was. I don't know if he was anywhere else a shepherd. Yeah, it's a nice little callback. Other thoughts? How are we enjoying? I'm still generally enjoying this work. I'll go to Angela.
I think that, Heywood and his Romans and his Latin and all the rest of it, we've got Tamburlaine, but we've also got the Shepherd's Calendar, which is such a well-known work. Everybody loves that. So instead of the constellations, you've got this idea of the shepherd. He's done so much hard work to make this, really appropriate to the clothiers and their sort of whole sense of position in society. It's really impressive, I think. John Taylor's a bit of a royalist for me. I'm kind of irritated with him. He hates ballads, but although I'm arguing not, but actually I'm really getting to like him.
Eric.
This reminded me of, the speech that I just read. Reminded me of one of the plays we did, but I can't remember the title, which is very bad. I was going to say Witty and Witless, but I don't think it's that one. Where we have a noble person arguing with a farm worker or something, and arguing
gentleness and ability.
Yes, thank you. And it's basically this, yes, I was here. Being a merchant is more important than being a laborer or something, because they kind of make everything, or we bring you things in order for you to make things, in order for us to eat things, and it's sort of it felt like that a bit, although obviously this is fitted perfectly to the cloth workers. Yeah.
Any other thoughts before we close the primary text? There is additional material at the end. Angela.
I'm so excited. They're drinking leather bottles. They could have sung the ballad. Because wow.
The leather bottle.
Exactly.
It's a good one.
Maybe that's the kind of thing that Heywood was so sniffy about.
Yeah.
Definitely. It feels like
brilliant.
Which is weird because it only took one sentence to describe that dance, whereas Heywood took a whole paragraph to say some stuff happened here and I'm not going to describe it.
Yeah, I'm going to spend an inordinate amount of time not describing something that I could describe in a sentence.
I don't know, but it seems likely. It's also it just surprises me how this is Taylor's only foray, as far as we know, into kind of drama. And he's got a real facility, it's really good, jaunty verse. Comes across really well. So I'm kind of surprised he can do more of it, really.
Rachel?
No, that was a question that I had floating around. Was these guys, how they got the job, did they send in sample writing or a resume, or was it just who they knew to write these to write these up or be a part of this show?
They would have actually gone along to the company hall or to the master's house and done kind of pitches. So and then they were chosen. often on the basis they were slightly cheaper than the other person. Sometimes there was no competition at all, sometimes there clearly were personal links.
Yes, because we literally had Heywood just saying he's read them, his unperfect papers, and you know that there is something of a pitch meeting and discussion, and you know.
Well, in the minutes of the Ironmongers Company, there's clearly a kind of a written down version of what Decker and Christmas presented to them at Ironmongers Hall, because it's almost exactly the same as the book.
Okay, we've got actually very little text of the pageant to go. We then have some explication that follows. We'll just finish the pageant's descriptions before we go to the explanations of them. So, Rachel, if you could read the next bit of prose. Time, Angela, if you could reprise Time. And Stephen, if you could read the bit of prose after that closes the primary bit of this text.
Lastly, at night, when his lordship returns from Paul's, the pageants being 6 in number, going all before him in their order, attending him to his house, then the last pageant, being an ancient monument of fame, shall present itself to his lordship, in the front of which piece is erected a figure representing Fame, with a silver trumpet in her hand. The monument being adorned with the arms, escutcheons, hatchments, and impresses of diverse lord mayors that have been of the worshipful company of the cloth workers, whom, though time hath interred, Fame revives, sounding their praises, and enforceth time to revive their noble memory, encouraging his lordship to follow them in all their honorable actions, that when time shall determinate, his lordship's shield of honor may be added to the rest of his predecessors. And as this pageant of the Monument of Fame is a representation of the night, so the night, and this following speech at his lordship's gate, is a conclusion and dutiful farewell to the day's triumph and solemnity.
Time that this day his service hath expressed, in duty brings your lordship to your rest. Yet ere I take my leave for your content, I'll show the meaning of this monument. Then know, this ruined piece doth show that stones and tombs consume as do their owners' bones, for time is circular in his effects, builds and throws down, and ruins and erects. But fortune, death, or fame, or time cannot make virtuous men, or virtue be forgot, for immortality is pleased to make fame with his trump the drowsy world to wake, who from demolished dilapidations proclaims the memorable nominations of worthies of this worthy company, who honoured lived and did with honour die. Sir William Hewitt was, as you, my lord, to poise the balance and to wield the sword. Sir Rowland Heywood next Sir James Hawes did rule this city justly by the laws. Next was Sir Edward Osborne, London's mayor. Then Sir John Spencer gained the honoured chair. Sir Thomas Skinner after had the place. Next did Sir Nicholas Mosley gain the grace. Then Sir John Watts, his year with honour passed, and noble Freeman, who deceased last. King James, the wisest and the learnedest king, whose fame throughout the spacious world doth ring, he knew your merits, worth and dignity, and therefore chose your worthy company to be his brotherhood. He did understand you were most fit for his fraternal band. And you, my lord, whom time hath brought to be the noblest branch of this fraternity, time here salutes you, wishing you may move more high in honour as you do in love. 'Tis truly said, that man that rules his passions doth conquer more than he that conquers nations. As you have ruled yourself, let it appear in ruling London this ensuing year. So you, with time, shall be together blessed, and time shall bring you to eternal rest.
For a period to these triumphs, and to give desert her due, it was shameful impudence in me to assume the invention of these structures and architectures to myself, they being business which I never was inured in or acquainted with all, there being little of my directions in these shows, only the speeches, and illustrations, which are here printed, I do justly challenge as mine own. All the rest of the composures and fabric were formed and framed by the ingenious and industrious Mr. Robert Norman, citizen and painter of London, who was indeed the prime inventor, prosecutor and finisher of these works, with the assistance of Zachary Taylor, a quaint and well-known curious carver, which being gracefully accepted and approved of, after good Christmas, the authors may be more merry at the next.
And there we will pause. There is more material to come, but that is the bulk of the material. So yes, thoughts on the room, Mr. Robert Norman, industrious and ingenious that he was. He's really nice about him. He's very humble about. I couldn't do that. That's artificing stuff. I can't do that. I just wrote the words, mate. Any thoughts around the room? I say what we've got coming up in text-wise, we've got explanations of the pageant, so to understand things. Whether that will give us much more additional data about the actual pageants themselves, I am not so sure, but there is that potential additional data. Does anyone have any thoughts before we go into the explanations? Stephen?
I'm just wondering, it gets an awful lot less specific, doesn't it, towards the end? That we have we have 6 pageants, but they don't all get the same level of description, I don't think. We have this ancient monument thing. I'm not sure if that's 1 or 2 of them. I've tried to count it. Maybe I've counted it wrong.
It must have been the same one from earlier, mustn't it?
Well, but it says there are 6 pageants. So, okay, maybe I've counted it wrong.
There's an ancient monument of fame which just gets a passing reference. That might be the missing one.
That's what I meant, the Endymion one.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is also an ancient monument of fame, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're separate, but yeah.
Unless the drinking group are a pageant.
Yeah,
Dancing
maybe the
Shepherds
dancing
was
shepherds.
drinking. Because that's what Heywood was doing. He was counting that as a pageant, wasn't it? A kind of like a jig thing.
Right. Okay.
Maybe. I don't think we're being definitive here. I think that you're right. There is a sense of I was going 6. Was it 6? Eric.
I was just going to say it is the triumph of fame and honor, so it makes sense that there would be fame pageants. Maybe they won't be as explicit though, because honor clearly has more words, whereas fame has none.
And Endymion gets to ride on a ram's back.
Fame has a trumpet, though.
Traveling style.
True. Okay. Shall we find out what they're all about? Would you like the explanation? I'm sure you're all dying for the explanation. Liza, if you could do the first explanation. I'll ask Greg if you can do this. The next bit of that, Po, a famous river. I'll ask Stephen to do the meaning of the second pageant, being Time and Mercury. Angela, upon the third pageant, I'll ask you to read that, and then we're out, I think. So take it away. The explanation of the first pageant, please.
Thetis, daughter to the sea god Nereus, she was wife to King Peleus. Also Thetis was the mother of Achilles, who was 7 cubits in height, and the most valiant captain amongst the Greeks at the siege of Troy. Danubia is a great river that runs through Hungaria by the famous cities of Buda, Brundisium, and Belgrade, and so it passeth into Germany by the town of Regensburg and through Swabia, Bavaria, and Austria. It is also called Donau, but passing into Illyria, it is at a part of Thracia called Istria, changed into the name of Ister. It receiveth 60 rivers into it, the most part of which are navigable. It falls into the sea called Pontus Euxinus, or the Euxine Sea.
Po, a famous river in Italy, Seine, a river in France which runs through Paris. Volga, a river that runs through the large empire of Russia. Ems in East Friesland, from whence the city of Emden have name. Elbe or Alb is a river that passeth from Boheme through Saxony, Misnia, and so to the towns of Hambra and Stode into the German Ocean. Tanis, a great river northward which parts Asia from Europe. Nilus, a famous river that runs through Ethiopia and Egypt, and because it never rains in Egypt, it is watered and made fruitful once a year by the overflowing of Nilus. Ganges is a mighty river that runs through and divides India. It is one of the 4 rivers of paradise, and is called by Moses Faison. Tigris is one of the 4 named. Hidkel. Euphrates passes by Babylon and was also one of the rivers of paradise named by Moses Pera. And the Tiber, a river that runs through Rome. Jordan, a river that runs betwixt Galilee and Judea and falls into Mare Mortium, or the Dead Sea. Xanthus, a river in Phrygia near Troy, of which it is said that if sheep drank of the water, that fleeces became yellow. Indus, a great and goodly navigable river that have its head from the mountain Taurus or Caucasus. It encompasseth India on the west and falls by Asia into the lake called Paulus Meotis, and part into the Indian Sea. Asphaltites is the Dead Sea or Mare Mortium. It is in Syria, and it is held to be the place where Sodom, Gomorrah, and the rest of the 5 cities stood, which were consumed with fire and brimstone from heaven.
The meaning of the second pageant being Time and Mercury. Time has seen 426 several days of mayoralty, which is so many years since the city's government was changed by King Richard I from portgraves, provosts and bailiffs to the honourable title and dignity of Lord Mayor. Men that come rightly to places of honour and dignity must make good use of time. Truth is the daughter of time, who though falsehood may obscure her, yet time will bring her forth at last, where her bright virtue shall outshine the sun. There is nothing goes beyond time but eternity.
Upon the third pageant, which represented a city, London doth express her duty and thankfulness in acknowledging her happy preservation and government, when many of the goodliest cities in the world are either ruined and confounded, or else far short of her peaceful and plentiful felicity. As first, Thebes was a great city in Egypt. It was built by King Busiris. It had 100 gates about the walls. It was 40 miles in compass. The walls were 30 stads high and 6 stads in breadth. It was written that 200 watchmen watched at every gate. When it was destroyed by Alexander the Great, there were found the tombs of 77 kings, and good kings they had been, for the law was amongst them that bad kings should have no burial. Also, there was another Thebes in Boeotia, built by Cadmus, and a third Thebes in Cilicia, where it is said Andromache, the wife to the worthy Hector, was born. Numantia was in Spain, and being besieged by the brave Roman Scipio, rather than they would yield their city, they burned it with their wives, children, goods and families. Carthage was a goodly city in Africa. It was 40 English miles in circuit. It was held against the Romans 44 years when Rome was in her greatest greatness. It brought forth the valiant captain Hannibal and was at last destroyed by Scipio Africanus 144 years before Christ's birth. The place and country where it stood is now called Tunis, which is a harbour or receptacle for pirates, sea rovers, and misbelieving Turks. Jerusalem, the chief city of Judea, where King Solomon's temple was, and where our Saviour suffered his passion, is now a ruined piece under the subjection of the Turk. There are 2 Babylons, one in Chaldea, where Nimrod's tower was erected, and another Babylon there was in Egypt, there being, as their names do signify, both in confusion under the Turk. Constantinople was the metropolis and the head city of the Grecian or Eastern Empire. It was won from the Christians the 29th of May, 1453, by the Turkish Emperor Muhammad II, which Muhammad did also win the Empire of Trebizond and took 12 kingdoms and 200 cities from the Christians. Rome, nor any city that holds Rome for chief, cannot declare any such true reality in their happiness and government as London justly may do.
These few expressions I thought fit to set down here for the illustration of such words and places as may seem hard and obscure to some mean readers. And that ends it. Isn't that nice? He put some end notes in for, you know, the average reader. That you couldn't get more different from Heywood's approach. Which is, go and read a book.
Well, you know, if you had watermen participating in this, maybe they would want to know about all the rivers in all the other cities.
Yeah, you know. Tunis receptacle for pirates. I think that we all need to know that. Angela. You were
Thank you,
waving.
Bob. I was waving.
Oh, just waving for pleasure. That's
Right.
fine.
I mean, in fact, Liza's point about the rivers, absolutely. If I was going to say something, it was going to be something like that, but she said it.
Cool. Other thoughts? Eric?
It was an invalid point, I think. I was just sort of intrigued by the mention of like using Moses as a reference rather than no, that was me getting confused with something else. Sorry, yeah. Apologies.
So we are very much into the end of our session. So we've covered two texts. We've covered a Heywood, which covered a similar ground to previous Heywoods. Was doing similar business, and then we get this fascinating text. I have to say, I don't know if I'm going to say I'm a big fan of John Taylor, but I have really enjoyed being in his company. I think it's nice to break up the pattern of the same author, and I think that makes a big difference as well. Any final thoughts from anyone you want to throw in before I close the session? Liza?
Yeah, just intriguing to see what two authors do with a lot of the same material. To see, you know, given the same general brief, to see their differing takes on it. It doesn't seem that long since Heywood took over. It's only been a couple weeks in our time. But yeah, I do like John Taylor. Does he get hired back?
No.
No?
No.
But he's so good.
He puts a bid in the following year with Norman, but Heywood and the Christmas brothers at that point underbid him. So it's a shame. Yeah, it's a real shame actually. I think it's really, really good. It's got a lot going for it. This one, I think. Go and read more Taylor. Read his pamphlet about the voyage in a brown paper boat to Gravesend, because that is one of the greatest things ever written. It's hilarious. Oh, when the coaches, the world runs on wheels. Read that because that's hysterical.
Yeah.
Angela.
Well, it just suddenly struck me when Tracey said that Christmas has died. He makes reference to Christmas dying, and I wonder whether there was this little, kind of hiatus is because of Christmas dying, and so they get an in. But once the family Christmas, links up with Heywood again, maybe then there's sort of no hope of getting.
I think you're absolutely right. And Norman's been involved in mayoral pageantry since at least 1619, so he's got a good track record. Yeah, it's almost definitely that.
Sadly, we have run out of time. We've been packing a fair amount of text in, and yes, that's it for 1633 and 34. We will be returning with a couple more. Thomas Heywood Pageants returns as we race towards the end of the sequence. All that remains is to thank all the readers for all their wonderful reading and their thoughts. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.